So my family background really comes from two different places. Um, Personally, my like immediate family, parents, and my grandparents on my dad's side, we live in Westchester, New York. And my mom's side of the family was from Fitzgerald, Georgia. My dad's side, my grandma and her mom, they were originally from Virginia, and they moved up north as as my grandma was having more kids. I think my great grandma has like 6 or 7 kids. Like I have my grandma has a ton. I always had a ton of great aunts. They're fantastic. Um and so yeah, like my mom moved up, like my mom's side of the family, they moved up to Queens and the Bronx, and my dad's side of the family ended up moving up to Westchester, New York. My parents met in the city, and then they moved upstate when they had me. Okay, in terms of elementary school, I started off in public school. I went to a fantastic pre-K and kindergarten program, which I think was super helpful in terms of my education and like giving me that foundation. Like that's what my parents were all about, is like making sure I had a good education. So I started with that. Once I hit first grade in the public school system, um, my mom felt like I wasn't getting enough support because I had, they had always done a lot of educational stuff with me. So my reading level was a little more advanced, but the school didn't necessarily have all the resources to support that. So they started looking at other places I could go. And there was a local Catholic school. My mom really liked that. We're not Catholic, but she's like, those nuns will teach you. And so so she sent me to Catholic school, and that was also fantastic education. She was right. It's definitely rigorous, but you learn so much, and they teach you, they taught me a really solid work ethic that I needed to get through the rest of school. Like I can still rely on, the foundations of how to work that they had taught us, and like having, even small things from like having good handwriting, to like, how to read and how to balance a lot of different types of reading, move from class to class. Like that, I was a really good part of my foundational education. So yeah, once I went through elementary and middle school, at this one Catholic school, which was great. It was called Saint Elizabeth Ann Catholic School, and we eventually moved into high school. So I did want to stay in the private school system, but I didn't specifically want to go to a Catholic high school. Like I love my experience, but I felt like I was time for something different for me personally. So I applied to a bunch of different schools, and I was really distraught because I didn't get into the artsy high school because, like, I watched a whole lot of Victorious, and I was like, I'm gonna be amazing. Like, I'm just gonna be on stage. I just had this idea in my head. I'm not Ariana Grande. I'm not Victoria Justice. Didn't happen. But that's okay because it was still great anyway. And I got into a different high school called the Hackley School. So I didn't know anything about the school. I don't even remember if I toured the school. My parents were both working, and they couldn't. They actually, it's private school system is really interesting in how they decide on acceptances because they interview your parents too, to make sure you not that you fit, but that what your home life is like, how much support you have, so they kind of know if they want to bring you in what you need, what they're expecting from you guys. But my parents were both working, so they couldn't interview my parents. So my grandparents were like, they can talk to us. We've got this, because they lived super close to the school. So my parents dropped me off in the morning. My grandparents drove me over and like did the interview instead of my parents, which was hilarious. I'm sure they had like a phone call with my parents and stuff. My grandparents were like, we've got this. So they were fantastic. Like everyone's been super supportive of my education, and that's like invaluable. So I did get into school, which was great. And I really enjoyed my time at Hackley. And I know like it was interesting because like private school's not for everybody. People have a lot of mixed experiences, but I think one thing I'm really good at is like making the best of my situation, and I like loved everything about being there. The faculty was great, specifically like Black faculty members. Like all of the theater teachers I've had at Hackley were Black. I don't know why, but that's been like the thing. And we had one teacher our freshman year. She ended up taking a different position at elsewhere. So our new theater teacher, his name was Mr. Teacher, is Willie Teacher, but he is fantastic. He was probably one of the best teachers that I've ever had. So like integral to my education, and you know, it was more than just like theater for him. It was also teaching you life skills, communication, presentational things. Like it was, theater was just such a refuge at that school. So it was so much fun for me to do that, and him, encouraging us to do better and to put on really good art and really meaningful art. Like, all we wanted to do was like Grease, and he's like, we are not doing Grease. He's also not a musical theater person, so he refused to do musical theater. So we did a whole lot of Shakespeare and modern plays, but like it's really cool to look back on that and see like how much fun we had putting on really unique stuff that, like, you could see Grease at every high school. So it was cool that we got to be really different about it and like use different spaces. So yeah, he's fantastic. I had a lot of really great teachers at that school. I know. I think I can really pinpoint my interest to politics and writing to like two different teachers, which one was Mr. Lobko. He was my one of my writing teachers, and Mrs. Butterfield. She was also one of my English and writing teachers. And they just really, I just feel like picked like a really great curriculum. Mrs. Butterfield specifically did a whole lot of poetry with me, so that kind of helped me learn about the presentational side of things, and really seeing the value in the value and weight of your words and like how far that can like really take you and travel with you. So that was fantastic. And Mr. Lobko was one of my English teachers, and he taught me a lot about he just picked a really cool, or I guess him and the whole department picked really cool updated curriculum. And I like the way he taught it to us. Like, we really felt like we got into stuff and understanding stuff that was like, not your typical, like, we of course had your typical high school books. Like, you had to read Moby Dick. It was a long, arduous process. It was more process of reading the book than like about what the book was about, but besides that, like, we had some really interesting and updated material to like learn from. We got to that I thought was cool, and he picked my school is really good at picking a diverse range of authors. Now that I look back, we had a really diverse range of authors, and like, not just reading from like older white guys in class. We got to read from women and Black people and Latinos. Like, it was really cool to have that as a foundation and carry that with me of like, the understanding of what English literature could be and not just what it's supposed to be. And then in terms of politics, my history teacher got me really interested in politics. He was probably one of the most interesting people I have ever met. Oh my God. His name was Vladimir Klemenko, and I'm very convinced he's a Russian spy, but he's so interesting. Or former Soviet defector, something along those lines. He like really sold it to us like that, and I'm not sure how much of it was a joke. That was his thing. Like, you never knew how much of his stories, like he always said his stories are real. They're probably all real, but you can never tell how much of it's a joke. But he was so interesting, and he's just really adamant about connecting history to current events, because like I really believe that like, news is just history as it happens. And he definitely, try to take things outside of the textbook and make it really, really interesting to get through like AP history and all these different stuff. And he's just such a fun person to talk to and to learn from. So I think, and I like still have him on Facebook. He's like super politically active and really outspoken. But I think that's where that interest in politics like kind of came together, and eventually I like ended up in journalism. So yeah, that was like a nice combo. I do remember reading Beloved for class, which is great because you don't always think like a high school class, but like they really were encouraging about what we could handle. We talked about Beloved. When we did talk about Moby Dick, actually, it wasn't. There was so much deeper in it. We talked about queer theory along with that, which like I don't know if every school does that, but like it's so ingrained in he didn't want to glaze over the fact that like this is Hermel was a whole person, and he, like at that time, you have to hide whatever your intentions are if they're outside of the norm, and this is the way that you have to code things. And like they made that, he just made that super clear, and we were reading things that like a lot of times things have to be coded to get published or things like that. So it was really cool to be able to talk about like women, like women in gender studies, along with our reading queer theory, like not glazing over the parts of English that are kind of abrasive, like diving right into it. We definitely talk about, like the history of like Black people in America, and he was just really encouraging of like diving into that deeper. Oh, I remember, I swear he like let me do a paper on COINTELPRO and like the FBI coming after the Black Panthers in high school, and that like got me fired. He was like fired up for me. That like got me fired up, and he's like I still have that paper. Like that was probably one of the only papers I've actually like saved from high school, but like I love the process of like writing it so much and like learning that history where I felt like, okay, like this is that connection to like things that are real and things that affect people. So I like love that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I was looking, I really wanted a communication school. Pretty much all the schools I really wanted to go to had one. From New York. So I looked at Syracuse, of course. I looked at a couple West Coast. I was thinking about a couple West Coast things, but my mom said couldn't go farther than 4 hours. That was the rule. Like if I got to take a plane to her, it's too far. So we stayed East Coast mostly. I have to respect the decision. They're helping me pay for it, so I got that. But yeah, fortunately, there's a lot of great schools in the area. I looked at, New York City schools, Columbia, things like that. But I'm a suburban kid. I really liked AU. It felt like that traditional campus. I went to a predominantly white high school. I knew I could handle a predominantly white college. Um, and also, that's a lot of what got pitched to me. I went to a private school, so it was like technically an Ivy League prep school. So they really want their kids to like aim high and like, aim for a good education. So that's, it's not that I think that's a really interesting question of like why I didn't decide to go to HBCU, because it wasn't really an option that I guess was presented to me. It wasn't what I thought about, because I don't think either of my parents did either. So, and it wasn't like, you have to do X, Y, and Z, like, this is the only way to get an education. Because I know there's a lot of tension about like Black people who don't go to HBCUs, but I don't think it was a detriment to me, especially since I was already comfortable in that environment. But I do have to recognize that like I didn't consider it as an option because, my school is a mostly white high school, so they don't consider that as an option. They don't, unless you just have asked your school that I want to do this. I don't think my school would have presented that to me as an option. But like they were still a fantastic advising office and super helpful with my college process. Like, because it's changed so much since my parents did it. So having that support system was like great. Like I know a lot of kids who like got into AU but didn't have that college prep process, and like my school made sure we were really, really prepared, which is great. I found out about AU two different ways. A good friend of mine from high school ended up coming here. Him and another girl were in the class above me, and they ended up coming here. So and they really liked it and thought it was interesting. And I came down to visit, and I was like, "Oh, it's a great school." And then I had started picking up this interest in communications, but I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. Like, it's easy to want to do broadcasts because that's what you see every day. Like my parents turn on the TV and you see news anchors and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, I want to be broadcast. I no longer want to be broadcast, but then I really wanted to do broadcast. So AU had this summer program called Discover the World of Communications. And it's a summer program specifically for high school students. It's like a sleepaway camp. You get to come here, live in the dorms, which is like really exciting when you're an underclassman, like when you're in high school, but kind of nasty then when you get to be in college. You're like, oh God, why would I ever be excited to do this? But yeah, I was like super hyped. I got to like, be away from my parents for like part of the summer and like live in the dorms and meet some of the faculty here, which was fantastic because they had really cool courses. We did a project about, doing PR and designing stuff for a nonprofit. Like they had like high school students work with a local nonprofit to come up with a PR campaign. And one of our professors was like shooting a documentary about bumper stickers. And she like, but yeah, we got to like, you know, she explained her process, and we got to learn about editing and script writing and stuff like that for her class, which was super cool. And we had a broadcast class where we like actually got to be anchors and like sit there at the desk over in the media center, and you know, it was really cool because you had the green screen behind you and someone was doing the weather. There's like probably still a clip of me online somewhere like doing that, but like I hate it because nobody told me I was like, so I was squinting at the teleprompter. So from then on, I have like I like always make sure I'm like this when I look at a teleprompter, like wide-eyed, so I don't have to do that again. So it was a learning process, but like a really fun one, a fun one at that. But yeah, it was a really great experience. Like being here, I was like, this is the kind of college experience I want to have. Like, I love the professors. I love what they do, like what they're talking about. Like the subject matter was really interesting to me. So like that helped me be more sure of like I like this area. I still hadn't like decided on journalism specifically, but like I knew that like communications was where I wanted to be, and I could figure it out in there. So then that's when I decided to. Later on, I did when I was like I guess a high school junior or sophomore at that point. I think it was a high school junior. So the next year, I decided to apply to AU. Yeah, I think I had a pretty good transition to college life. Having, you know, I was fortunate enough to have two parents who both went to college. My mom had a like less traditional college experience. I think she didn't do like a whole, it wasn't a whole on campus thing, but that's totally fine. And my dad had a more traditional one, and he was like very adamant about me picking a place I like to go, because the first college he picked, he hated it. He was so mad. He was in the middle of nowhere. I think it was like Iowa or something, and he was like just livid. But he meant like he came home, did community college, and eventually went to get his I'm pretty sure he went to go get his master's for IT from Stevens, which was cool. So yeah, he was like adamant about like picking a college experience you want to like, because you know, and if you don't like it, like it's okay to change. So that was like nice to have that as like a foundation. Um, but yeah, coming on AU's campus, I definitely had a good transition. I think I what helped a lot was I came in with friends. I had met so AU had an accepted students day in New York City, and you know, I went down with my parents to like, you know, meet some people, and the how do I explain it? So I met a bunch of girls who I kind of knew because I was in the New York private school system, and that's a really small. It's a pretty small system, so you end up knowing a lot of people. So I knew them by name or through other friends at my school. So it was like cool because I was like, oh, okay, I already know these people, and most of them ended up living on my floor, which was great. I think all, you know, three or four of the people I met ended up being really close to me. So it was like super nice to be able to walk down the hall and like knock on my best friend's door, like, or you know, she became my best friend, like knock on her door. My current roommate was someone I met there. She's still probably one of my best friends. So like that, having that as a foundation coming in was like a much easier transition. I wasn't like, oh my god, I don't know anyone, I don't know who to hang out with. Like already knew who I was going to hang out with when I got here. And we were like, you know, for the first year, we were like ride or die, which was so cool to like have people like stick with you. Yeah. So I think the time I was like solidified that like journalism, my thing was like second semester freshman year, like because you still have time to change your major. So like I didn't feel like too locked into it at that point, but I did like it. So that whole time, but second semester freshman year, we were covering one of the protests on campus, and um, I think the article's still on the website. One of the frat boys had walked by the protesters sitting across the tunnel, and they're like, "Oh, like they should just run them over. Like they're, you know, like why are they bothering to sit here? They're just being annoying, blah blah blah." Like this was like after all the news and stuff. So like, you know, and then one of the people protesting her, you know, felt very concerned, and because there was like the point was that they were blocking the tunnel, so like now someone's advocating to run them over, and like that's really stressful. Um, yeah, so you know they start yelling about this, and I was like, and it like clicked for me because I was covering the protest with one of my friends, who was also on Blackprint with me, and I was like, oh, this is news. This is the news that, you know, make people concerned and things like that. So I started talking to people and trying to gather as much information as possible. I like, you know, get people's social media who have videos. So I was like, you know, please send this to me as soon as possible, things like that. And we're like sitting right at the tunnel. So as soon as the protest over, me and my friend run up to Anderson, like it's like literally up the hill, run up to Anderson, sit in our dorms, She starts writing. I was taking photos. So like I start typing up the interviews we were recording, and I pop the SD card on my laptop, and I'm pulling photos off the camera and like trying to get videos from people. And like we got the article up like that, and like nobody else had that story, and that's why I was like, okay, this is why I love news. Like having a story, advocating for people through speaking truth to power, making that information presentable, and like really enjoying that process of like, oh, okay, like this isn't great, but like there's something I can do about it. Without, yeah, there's like, I don't know, like there was you didn't feel powerless. Like a lot of times, like when like racist stuff happens on campus, you're like, why are all these random people coming on campus and like, you know, coming after us? Like, and it makes you feel kind of powerless because you didn't ask for this. They just feel they feel empowered to show up. So like, this makes me feel empowered to like, fight back, kind of. Yeah. The Blackprint started actually as a part of the our campus's Black Journalists Association chapter. In 2014, our NABJ started a specifically student club, student chapter of that. And a couple of our the SOC students joined. They were Black students who were really interested in that side of covering journalism, which is great. And they had this idea. They're like, oh, what if we like, because they had been in student media before. They've tried a couple of different publications, but they weren't always super happy with the way things were run or how things got covered, or having to either fight for topics or choose topics, and trying to make Black student issues like a priority. So like that was one of their goals when they started. And they had this idea of like, what if we start our own publication? Like, because we're in the NIBJ, they had like probably some funding from the student office. They're like, we could just start this for ourselves. And the girl who really kind of came up with that idea graduated. So that was in about 2015, I think they were thinking about that. And then she graduated. So in 2016, they came in for the fall. These two seniors, they were seniors at the time. Taryn Daniels and Alicia Brown, and they are the ones who actually got the publication up and running. They like took the summer, made a website, and like got and went through the whole process of like getting the club like officially like recognized as a club, which was great. So they got that done by like they kind of got that started by fall 2016, and that's when I came in. And yeah, I came in that fall, and I think they were like tabling on the quad, or somebody told me about that. I don't remember how I ended up there, but I was like, I'm going. And I grabbed my best friend, and I was like, because we're both SOC majors and POC students, and I was like, you coming with me? So we pull up to the meeting, and they're like super excited to have people, because it was still really small. Like they hadn't written anything, they had only written a couple articles at that time, that last year. And yeah, they were excited to have stuff, and just, it was a lot of, the structure of the organization has changed a lot, but we definitely kept some of the stuff that they started with. So trying to have it really open, and letting students pitch topics to us and choose stuff. We definitely assign more things than we used to. Like when we first started, they were just happy to have us, so they're like, please write anything, write whatever you want, type of thing, which was so great because we got to be really creative with it. But yeah, that's really how it got started. So they started it, then that was like pretty much like 3 years ago at this point. And they graduated, and really did their best to like set us up so we could do it for the future. And that next group of editors in chief, they were like either editor in chief and co-president. So that next group of editors in chief, they moved into trying to get us as an official student media publication, which we were able to do by that next year. So we've been an official student media publication for a lot shorter period of time, but it's been really great, having an office space, support, funding, and advising abilities. Like that has been definitely integral to like our growth as an organization. So yeah, we started with NABJ, but so much of it has grown into its own entity, and I'm like really proud that like I finally got to be editor in chief. Like I remember I started off, and I was like telling my friend like freshman year, I was like, I'm going to be editor in chief one day. Like I think I can do blah blah blah. It was like such a small organization, so I was like, I can do it, like totally. And like now I'm here, and I'm just like stressed all the time, but I love it, and I'm like so proud of like everything they got to do, and like, the things I got to implement like as editor-in-chief, like just like streamlining stuff and making sure they have support, ordering equipment, merchandise, like really turning into like full-fledged organization, updating the branding. Like I just believe so heavily in this brand because it's given me so much. So I want to make sure all the students like have the best support possible. The Blackprint really started at an integral time in AU's history because when we came in, that's when a lot of the racist incidents kind of, the more overt ones started happening. It started that freshman year really early in like the semester where these random freshman boys were running around like throwing stuff into people's dorms. And one of the things that they happen to do, either we're still not sure if it was like intentional or unintentional, they're just being dumb, they like threw a banana into somebody's dorm, which is like not cool to begin with, but yeah, like they hit one of the black girls with a banana, and it was I knew one of the girls was in the dorm. So and I think that one of the things that we realized coming out of that was like our coverage became important because it was not just covering the protests and interviewing students for what they had to say, but like, we had a specific in because we're the Black student publication. They're like willing to talk to us, and I think that's what's been um, really important through all these racist incidents is that we have tried our best to consistently show the POC student body that like we have the support of them and they're willing to come to us to write op-eds about things that they're concerned about because they know that like we'll work with them and be as supportive of them as possible. So yeah, that kind of started then, is that they were willing to talk to us. And we had like covered that, and then one of the other things we did kind of on that side is like the ASC educational side of it, where I feel like a lot of people didn't understand why the Black students were taking it as offensive. Like I genuinely had a teacher ask me, he's like, I don't know what the banana thing, he wasn't even like mad, he was just like, can you explain this to me, like I truly don't understand like why this is offensive, like I don't know the history behind it. And I think which I was kind of like, oh my god, like you're a grown man, but also like takes a lot of like, you know like took him taking a step back and being like, coming to ask a freshman like, can you teach me, which I thought was really important. And I think being on the Blackprint gives that authority where people are willing to come ask us and talk to us, or we can do that teaching side of it in how we write things about how people consider stuff. And like we had a student do an op-ed on socioeconomic status, and like how things can be really expensive as a freshman, or people who have more wealth and you don't always realize things, don't always realize what's doable, what you're able, um, they don't always realize, what limitations can be if they don't have that little, very socioeconomic background. And they eventually started using that in the AUX curriculum, which is fantastic. That like our articles are teachable moments. It's students talking to other students about things that are important, things that are real on campus, and I think it's fantastic. Um, we started off with the banana thing, and like getting videos and talking to people who were protesting about that. But like as the year things did get kind of quieter, but as the year progressed, we got Taylor Dumpton elected as president, which was great, and I think we did an article about that. But when they put up the bananas and the nooses and stuff, like that's when we really found that our coverage was integral, and that because we had a different angle, like people were still coming to the site and like reading the stuff and like sharing it out. And it was, because we were in all the Black student group chats, we knew the protest was happening early, we knew who to talk to about it, we knew who was organizing it, like that was kind of an in to like what was happening. We could, ask different questions of the administration and really focus on doing follow-up, focus on follow-up pieces on what's changed, or having students do op-eds about, what still needs to be done, even after that. But it was like trying to cover everything that happened, because if we wanted to represent the community, we had to make sure that we were representing for the community by covering their issues and covering what was really threatening them at that time. Being at a PWI is always going to be a balancing act. I think being in, an all, creating a all POC newsroom for ourselves has been really helpful when we had to cover it, because we don't really have to justify why we're covering it or why it's important. Like we know we are already affected by it, and it's just how we do it and, a different take on it. But I definitely feel like when I'm out of this newsroom, when I've gotten fantastic opportunities to intern and stuff, and I really am so grateful I got to do this. Fantastic. But once you're in a, because I spent so much time in this newsroom, I'm like, oh, this is different. I have to, kind of present a different way or put on a different face to be, you know, acceptable and functional in a predominantly white newsroom. Like, how that feels different. Like, it's nice to have this foundation of like being able to rely on I was able to know exactly what, why my issues were important, and I'm never afraid to like pitch those or ask about those specifically, which is what that gave me. But I think I also, by going to different private schools and like trying to moderate different levels of blackness that I can present, I've learned about how to deal with that in a newsroom, in an office setting, because it's so different. If you're on the Hill, like talking to people, like you have to present a different way if you really want to get that quote, or you really want to be able to talk to different people. Or sometimes it comes in handy if you like, need to get the attention of someone who people aren't talking to, and they can, see from looking at you that you may get them in a different way, or you may have a different understanding. So yeah. So my goal kind of was always to be editor in chief. Like, I really love the publication and writing for them, and I got to do a lot of really fun pieces, and great opportunities while I've been here. Like, for example, there's this festival called All Things Go, and I got to go cover that, which was great. We got like a photo pass, and I like learned about photography, shooting from the photo pits, interviewing people while I'm there, which how to do like event coverage, which was great because we had this opportunity because I was in this more official organization. Sorry. All Things Go is a festival, that is put on in DC every year in Union Market, and they've changed different types of artists that they've had over the years, but it's a local festival, which is a great opportunity for local outlets to do uh, to do more professional coverage, especially for student outlets. So they're very definitely kind to us, and they like get us press passes every year, which I love. So yeah, I got to cover it, and we've had more writers cover it since then. Yeah, and I'm trying to think what else I got to cover. Yeah, different like red carpet events were really cool. Like, I got to cover the Hate You Give, and like take photos like of Amanda Stahlberg and the director and different people who were on the red carpet. And yeah, even smaller stuff of like interviewing students on campus who are doing really cool stuff, creative stuff, like being editor-in-chief and facilitating students creating more cool work. Like, we got to we had a freshman who was like, I'm gonna start a podcast, and like I was just helping her, trying to get up and do, like, she got up and did the whole thing together. So I was like, all right, I had to figure out how to post this, where to put it, what to make it look like, and make sure it gets out there, because like it was so cool that that they're passionate about doing this for us. So I want to make sure like my passion supports theirs when I'm doing different stuff. Yeah, I think a lot of things at the university, I think it's hard for the university sometimes to respond appropriately, because a lot of what does happen is outside people coming to campus. But they come here because they know we're such a vocal community, and that we won't really just let this happen. This is our home. We pay a lot of money to live here, to be here, and to feel safe. Like, if you didn't, if someone came onto your lawn and was putting threatening messages, you'd be really upset. So like, I think it's the same thing if they come onto our quad or come to the buildings and are like hanging up like genuinely threatening messages to Black people, to immigrants, to it's easy to come here and do this because we're an open campus, and they feel like they can get away with it. But it's really harmful to the student body, because it makes us concerned about our safety and like on stuff on campus. Like, the school's definitely changed safety measures in the past. There's definitely more police around. Like, we've asked them to be in the dorms more often, which is, I think, helpful on more levels than just worrying about racist incidents. Like, I think it's helpful when students have emergencies or things like that. Like, there's an authority figure there to help, not just the desk receptionist. And in terms of like responding. I so the university has responded to different things, but I think it's, dealing with the on campus climate versus like, outside offenders, it's really just beefing up security and like making sure you're, checking people if you see them doing something suspicious, like when they were hanging up the Confederate flags and like cotton. I don't know where this man got like real cotton from, but apparently people have time. And that one I got to cover. But and it's really not like just an AU focused thing. Like that one was a much larger issue. So in my piece um I talk about that, and it was this group that was doing multiple flyering around, had multiple flying incidents around DC, that were posting things that were, xenophobic, and racist things, or like in different areas. Like they had put up posters, saying, horrible things about like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or, putting up phone numbers and having it say like, here's how to report immigrants if you see them, like really insane things. So then they decided to come to our campus because we're a vocal community, because like, we live here. Like you don't want to stand for people going out of the way to threaten you or offend you where you are. So they put up still images of him posting stuff up, and I talked to somebody who found the flyers, which was for the piece, which was great. And he's like, oh yeah, I took a photo of the back of the poster and there was this symbol on the back. So I got to look that up, and it was called DC Counter Resistance. And the symbol that it took a lot of digging, this one was a more investigative piece that I enjoyed doing because it was more digging, but I felt like it was really important, because then that's when I found out they were doing all these other incidents, and that the symbol that they chose was from like Vichy, France, and they were specifically tying it to like Nazi history in France, of people that were exceptionally xenophobic, going after French themselves, black people, Jews, like all of these really horrible things, and they're using this as their symbol to represent their counter resistance to me living here. So just really crazy things. But I think like digging into that coverage, and like knowing that as a person of color, like a lot of these incidents that we either see on the news or things like that will have a much larger network of people supporting them. And I'm like, I know there's something else here. So being able to talk to people and like asking, did you see anything else? Do you notice anything else? And like digging for those posters, because I don't know if anyone else talked about that in their pieces, which is cool. Yeah, and I think handling internal campus climate is, also deals with larger cultural issues of things that come with time. But starting on campus is really important. Like we one of our editor-in-chief last year, Jenna, got to work with the Delta Phi Epsilon, the professional film fraternity on campus, and they helped us do they really set up all the film aspect of the video for the video about microaggressions on campus. And we were trying to find people to be in the video and questions and stuff to set up, and they helped us with the filming and editing aspect of that. And that's been one of our most successful videos, but I think because it's so real. And literally I think the provost emailed us and asked us if he could send it to every faculty member, which was, like astounding to me. Like that they're one that he even bothered to tell us. He's like, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm going to send this to all of your teachers. So I think that's why we do this work, is so people can recognize that, maybe I did say something off color, but maybe I didn't know that that's not okay to say, or maybe I pushed it too far, or just considering like what I know my students of color deal with every day. So if they're not feeling stuff in class, or they're really withdrawn, like this may be why. Maybe I should take a minute and talk to them, especially since they can be such a segmented community on campus. At the end of last semester, spring 2019, we had published a video called it's called DKA X Blackprint Voices, because it was a collaboration between our two organizations. We named it Voices specifically as a tribute to our event. We do an event every year, or we try to do as many events as we can. And it started with the NABJ, but it is called Voices. Mm-hmm. And we started with NABJ, but it's an event called Voices. So we thought, especially since we're asking people, what types of, we asked people for what types of microaggressions they had, and we were having different student voices read out what those microaggressions were. It was helpful to have that name, contribute to that legacy, and also like, back to SNCC voices and all these, historical things. Like it's just it's a thread that we really wanted to continue. Yeah, so it's called Blackprint X DKA X Blackprint Voices, and it's on our YouTube channel. It's on our website, which is theblackprintau.com, or at theblackprintau, all platforms. Check us out. But yeah, so we published that at the end of last semester, and there was, the student response was like, totally all over the place. We, people shared it everywhere, and it was, really, really cool to see students really resonating. They're like, oh, I had that experience. Oh, I understand that. Even international students were like, people still say things like this to me. It has like the most views out of anything on our channel. So like that just really shows how important it is. In a lot of, the experiences of students of color on campus. But at the beginning of this semester, which is fall 2019, the provost had emailed us asking if he could like share it out with the faculty members on campus. But just like, and we made sure to notify him that it was also DKA who helped us film it, because they were super integral in like getting the video done. Because we have a multimedia team, but it's always nice to be able to collaborate because there's so many great organizations on campus. Yeah, and we got to do different collabs. But one of the other collabs that we got to do, which was great, was we got to collaborate with the Eagle, because one of the Eagle writers, Kimberly, she's fantastic. She covered sports, and she really wanted to do, since the sports team has so many athletes of color, she really wanted to do a piece about what it's like to be an athlete of color on AU's campus. But the Eagle had that really formal connection with the sports department, which they like had to keep. So she was like, she's a good friend of mine too. So she's like, I want you guys to help me out to like, get asked the right questions, and be able to have that outside voice, because they're expecting us to be really formal about how we work with them. But she had that connection, so we could get in and actually ask those questions. So that was like a really awesome way we get to, got to collaborate and stuff like that. I definitely, one thing I do want to talk about is like diversity in the media industry, because I think I've written, God knows how many internship essays on, what would you do about diversity in the media industry? And it's a question that comes up a lot, and a lot of different organizations are trying to tackle it in different ways. I know NPR, when I was there, they talked to the intern class. A whole lot about finding more diverse sources, and changing the voices they have on radio, different things like that. Like, they're tackling it in different ways, but I feel like a really grassroots way to improve diversity in media is the work we do at the Blackprint. It's like getting students of color, because it's called the Blackprint, but we've really branched out into trying to support all students of color so they have a place on campus to write. But not just making sure their voices are heard, but like giving them the work experience, giving them clips, giving them videos and equipment, and and a weekly consistent opportunity to show their work. And that's what got me in. My work here was what got me all my internships, and hopefully soon a job. But yeah, the work we do here isn't just performative. It isn't just performative. It isn't just so, we can say that we did this or say that we covered it, or just so, just for us to do it. There's a much bigger implication of now that we've done this, now all these Black students, all these students of color have the opportunities to support their career. They can apply to internships saying, I have clips, I can do this, I have the skills to do this, I've been doing this, I can work in a regular newsroom, I can pitch articles, and I think that as a way to, supporting students of color as a way to improve diversity in newsrooms is the most important way to do this. You don't get there until you can teach people how to be there, until you can teach them, until you can teach them and let them teach themselves, to let them find their passions and try to find things to write about and test stuff out and make mistakes. and work with us and have mentors, like, having a staff of, almost entirely women of color, and being able to come to them and ask for help, talk about different pieces, things you want to cover. How do I write about this? I want to know more about this. Who do I talk to? How do I interview? You know, Giving them all these skills will improve diversity in media. Having organizations like this to support students of color, you know, to support students of color being in the space that they want to be, because you can't cross that bar of that barrier. You can't cross that barrier of entry until you have the experience and work ethic to get there. A lot of being in media is showing what you can do. Degrees are nice, but like if you know degrees are nice and classwork is great, but like that doesn't show up the same way as clips. And like I know from my experience that like it helped me stand out. It helped me be like, I can do X, Y, and Z. I'm ready to go. Like I can take on this type of responsibility. I'm worthy to stand up to kids who went to Q's, or schools in LA, like those big major media schools. Like we can stand up for that, and especially people of color, we can stand up for that, because we have supported ourselves and given ourselves the ability to survive in the media industry. And I think that's the only type of grassroots work that's going to diversify these really white newsrooms, is by getting people who can stand up in those newsrooms and get the work done, and already meet that. It's hard because you still have to meet a barrier of entry that somebody else set for you, but you know these kids are smart enough and talented enough to do it. And that's why I love doing it, and why I think it's so important, because like it's more than that. Like I want them to feel like they have a future, and I think if they're having fun doing it, writing here, then that's even better.